So dramatis persona, anybody? Okay, you would find it at the head of the list of characters in a play. Okay, that's what it means, the dramatic people, the people in the drama, the characters in the play. So you would see it, at the list of a Shakespeare play, listing whoever is there. And then another question before I read it, do you know who this is? This character? The messenger god, very nice, thank you. Anybody know his name, any of his names?
Hermes or Mercury?
Yes, that's right, Hermes or Mercury. So the messenger god, so that ties into the theme of this piece. So here we go. My little heel wings are not made of feathers, they are made of tongues. Their voices flap around my feet, hiss through my veins, and coil their noisy helix on my heraldic staff. They whisper, I am, I say, making me play all the characters this writer writes. I am the dead man on the field. I am the bird, the beast, the god, the groom, the bride. I am a hypocrite, a metaphor, a myth. If every wing word was hermetic, lovers, skeptics, Romans, Christians took my secret voices public, grew frenetic in praise of their high places and their gods. And in the end, their clamor just might run me mad. So I thought that this was sort of the dilemma of the writer when the writer tries to take on all kinds of different personalities, different personas, right, and write in the voice of various characters. Come on in, you're in the right place. Talking about poetry today. Usually this dilemma is more common for the novelist, right? Because if you're writing prose fiction, you actually have to develop these characters and inhabit the characters' personalities. Has anyone found that when you're writing a fiction character, either the character sort of takes over and does things you didn't plan for him or her to do, or vice versa, you start thinking and feeling like the character and maybe analyzing an event, the way that character might. I see some heads nodding. Do they want to share an instance in which that happened? Which a character of yours took over? William, did that happen to you? I saw you nodding.
Yeah, and just, sometimes the past project I was doing on, I wasn't sure what exactly I was thinking of next, but kind of once I had a feel for the characters, they kind of knew, their personalities kind of dictated what was going to happen next.
Very nice.
And I could kind of work from there.
Yeah, very nice. That reminds me actually of a distinction between writers that Skylar, you and I have talked about. Have you shared that in this class before, about the two kinds of writers? I don't remember the terms you had for them, but the one who plans everything ahead, and then the one who lets it develop. What are the terms again?
Architect and gardener.
Architect and gardener, right. Do you want to explain those two?
Basically, there are generally two main ways you'll write prose, which will either be you'll sit down and plan out the beginning, the end, the middle, how characters are going to react and stuff like that, like meticulously plan it, and that'd be architect. Or you just kind of sit down and just start writing your story, and it's more like, it's actually a discovery.
Right.
You just kind of discover how the story is going to go.
So some writers will obsessively outline everything. They'll write timelines, charts, and maps and everything. And others will just say, I have an idea. Let's see where it goes.
Oh, well, the names that I give them is planners and pantsers, like writing by the seat of your pants.
Nice. Very nice. And it happens in poetry, too. Now, this is the crazy thing. You might think this is non-intuitive, but this is a poetic form, right? What form is this? Do you know what this form is? This is a sonnet, which is one of the more controlled forms of poetry, right? Like it tells you, the writer, it tells me, the writer, everything I have to do. It tells me how many lines I have to have, how long those lines have to be, how many syllables have to be in every line, right? That's pretty restrictive. The rhyme scheme, although you may notice I kind of play with that a little bit, like a lot, right? And the syllable count, too. I don't know if you noticed that the last line is too long. Okay, and sonnets also dictate certain things about the content. Like, for instance, they usually start out with 8 lines of sort of posing a problem or asking a question or introducing one of the items in a simile or metaphor, and then they quite frequently solve the problem or answer the question or tell you the other thing that's being compared to in a simile or metaphor. So you would think that with a poem like that, you as a writer would have no freedom. But that's not true. You actually discover all kinds of things by writing into the form, right? It's like playing a sport in which there are all kinds of rules. You might think, well, that's not fair. The person should be able to run whenever and wherever he wants to on the field, right? But actually working within the form leads to freedom. So I'm going to talk about a few things related to that to you about like poetry, about meter and rhyme and form and stuff like that to introduce you to it, but also to maybe have some discussion about how it works. So first of all, rhythm and meter, not only in poetry, but also in nature. And I just want to point out to you that patterns, which is what a rhythm is, right? A rhythm is a pattern, either of beats or of sounds or of something, occurs all over the place in nature. So weather can come in patterns, either the pattern of the raindrops or the pattern of repeating weather events, or obviously the seasons occurring in a pattern. Here's an example of footprints as a pattern in nature. When you just start walking and you stop thinking about it, you walk in a regular rhythm, a regular pattern of beats. Where are some other places in nature or outside of the arts that rhythms occur? Anything come to mind? Any sort of naturally occurring rhythms you can think of? Yeah.
Waves.
Waves. Very nice.
Like your heartbeat.
Your heartbeat. Fantastic. Sunrise and sunset. Fantastic. So these are all patterns. These are all rhythms. These are all meters that occur over and over. So when rhythms and meters occur in poetry, I would encourage you not to think of them as being restrictive, but to think of them as being natural and as reflecting the patterns that happen in nature. Now, have any of you happened to read this poem before? I think we read it in English 15, didn't we? I have a vague memory of this poem in English 15. Maybe it was your class. We do it in English 202? Okay, so this is the first stanza of a very old ballad, and it has a really natural meter. So could I get everybody to clap or tap? This. Okay? Don't speed up, don't slow down. And we're going to read it out loud. I'll start and then join in when you feel it. Ready? The king sits in Dunfermline town, drinking the blue-red wine. Oh, where will I get a skeely skipper to sail this new ship of mine? Okay? So it has a very nice meter. You saw I had to fudge a couple of the syllables to make them fit. The reason is that this was originally put to music, probably accompanied by a harp or a lute. So the person literally needed to know when to strum, right? And then sing and have it fit. So every word, well, let's put it this way, every syllable, when you articulate a syllable, you can articulate it more strongly or more weakly compared to the syllables around it, right? And so if you've got the ear for that and you're setting words to music, you figure out how to make the strong beats of the music fit with the strong beats of the words. I have a second stanza of it. Oh, up and spoke an elder knight, sat at the king's right knee. Sir Patrick Spens is the best sailor that ever sailed the sea. So there's kind of a rest at the end of the second and fourth line when the music would still be playing on and the voice would be either just sustaining or taking a rest. Other than that, it's this nice, regular 4-beat pattern. This is a long, tragic ballad story of these sailors going to sea and there's a terrible storm and they all drown and they never come home again. Which ballads tend to be. They tend to be sort of the tabloid stories of their day. So I thought it might not be amiss to share one of my ballads just because I'm trying to use the meter and it's sort of the same thing, sort of like, a shocking story or whatever. So the ballad of Diarmuid and Grania. This was based on an Irish legend. Diarmuid and Grania, hand in hand, ran laughing over Connacht, after a cloud-white, vein-horned deer who split the sky as dawn knocked. He leapt over Dunmoran's strand as swans leap over the waves. Those heedless lovers followed him, wingless, over the bay. That heart, a speck against the green, surged up Ben Bulben's face, never slowing, singing the while those hunters held the chase. The creature won the mighty peak, 4 hooves on lofty rock. They saw its rack like arteries against noon's red, dead black. With tiptoe feet they soared the side of that fantastic cliff. Its smooth high power cowered them. Their prey fled in the mists. After that flight and flushed with love, they tumbled out of breath and kissed in wonder at the scene of Era's twilight west. Their long embrace shut out the wind that moaned of creeping dusk. Lost in her deep day-dawning eyes, he lay unwarned of tusks and thrusts to steal his life. A wild boar in flight stumbled on Diarmid O'Dina's flesh and gored him in gathering night. Grania felt her hands grow red and saw his body stained. She felt his breath in her beautiful hair and heard her fading name. Finn MacCool came over the ridge to claim his hunting prize. He saw the boar and Diarmid dead, and her Daedan in eyes. Finn stood watching while Grania knelt, then laid aside his spear. He touched her weeping, immortal face and touched her beautiful hair. Finn took her hand and raised her up, near where Diarmid died. With just one deep Daedanin glance, she leapt from the mountain's side. So there's an example of combining story with meter and rhyme and pattern, right? So what do you think? What do you think about the combination of just trying to tell a story and putting it into a shape? Have any of you tried to do that? And what has been the result? If you tried to, any of you songwriters? Yeah? Tell us a little bit about the process, right?
That's a hard question.
It is, isn't it?
I could write like 3 in 2 weeks, or I could not write one for like 4 months. It's kind of like inspiration, but I guess I kind of tend to like take like situations that were in my life or things that have happened to me or someone close to me, and kind of try to condense it and then put it to a rhythm.
Okay. So you start with the story as well, or the event, and then you shape it. Do you shape the words first, or do you think of the music next?
It honestly depends. Sometimes I just am playing around on the guitar and I find something cool and I want to put in words. So sometimes I have like the words in my head and I'm like, okay, I need to write these out and I'll put it to the music.
That's great. Yeah, both happen, and usually, whatever usually means, I guess more times than not, the words of songs get written first and then set to music, but certainly not always, by any means. Yeah. Andrew, you write songs as well?
I feel like a melody in my head.
Okay.
Like write that as like a bass line kind of like before the actual guitar chords.
Okay.
And then for like the length of it, I'll try to figure out like I'll pick a topic or something or just something that like kind of rhymes that can go along.
Oh, wow. So you really do the music first.
Not most of the time.
Yeah?
Sometimes.
Okay, so the music dictates a certain mood, a certain feeling, and then a story to go with it. Yeah, okay. Other stories, other times this has happened? I recently had, in one of my classes, somebody wrote a song, but she wrote the words, but she doesn't compose music, so then she found a song that fit the meter, and then, like karaoke, used the soundtrack, but then she found that she had to change her words to fit the rhythm and meter of this pre-existing tune and rhythm. So that was interesting. Okay, but then you're familiar with the somewhat more complex or more subtle meter iambic pentameter, right? That happens it's the most common meter in English, the 5 strong beats per line. And if you want to be really strict, 5 weak beats, each followed by a strong beat. But authors tend to play with it. And if you go through the canon of Shakespeare's sonnets, so it's 140 of them? 180? That's right, 153. You will probably not find one in which every single line is exactly iambic pentameter.
It's 153 songs.
Oh, okay. We would need to go and look up how many Shakespeare. Anybody want to Google that while we're...
What's the question?
How many sonnets did Shakespeare write? I first thought 140, then I thought 180, then he thought 153. Obviously, we need to know this. So, how many? I want it to be 140 because, like, they're each 14 lines, so that would be really nice and neat and tidy, right? Like a sonnet times 10. Okay, well, let me know. Interrupt when you find it. So I'm going to read these a little exaggerated, more than I would if I were actually just reading this in a poetry reading, so that you can hear the beats.
It's 154.
154. Did you come across the same? So close. Oh, so he beat the psalmist by 1, right? Is that the idea? Wow. Of course, the Psalms were written by multiple people. Okay. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is her gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometimes declined, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. You see, I started to read it a bit more naturally there at the end, because I can't stand ruining it. So that's another common meter that's not as boom, boom, boom as the ballad, because by the time this meter developed, poetry did not have to be set to music anymore. You could just speak it on its own, so its rhythms were a bit more subtle. So moving on from there to talking about what I'm calling music in poetry and in speech. So that was meter, but I'm going to talk about music in poetry in a different way. And by the way, this just reminded me that each of these photos are by photographers or artists whom I asked to contribute to this project. I asked them to share pictures that showed pattern, rhythm, meter in art and in nature, so appreciate the pictures while we're at it too. So, okay, this you've seen before as well, sorry for the repetition, but it turns out that when you speak, not just English but any language, the vowels of language actually have musical pitch associated with them. And that makes sense, right? Because you couldn't be making an articulate sound with a vowel without hitting a musical pitch. The only way you could make a sound without musical pitch are sounds like, right? They don't have a vowel to them. They couldn't be sustained, sort of clicking and ticking sort of sounds. But every vowel, you could mark it on a musical scale. So I heard about a jazz musician who was going around and recording poets reading their own poetry, and then he was annotating the notes that they spoke. So like, oh, when she said this word, it was a middle C. When she said this word, it was an F. When she said this word, whatever. And then using those as melodies, not songs with words to them, but instrumental jazz pieces. But he said it was actually really hard, because he didn't realize this before the project, that people have a very, very limited range when they speak. They speak like within a fourth. Da-da, like a really, really, really small range, so it would actually make really boring melodies. Because people just speak kind of monotone, right? Like people don't speak anywhere near the range that they sing in. So I thought that was curious. But okay, so this is from a really, really great poetry textbook called Western Wind that I strongly recommend to you. And so they figured out that the vowels can actually be put into a musical scale like this. Now, it's not that everyone's is the same notes. So it's not that everybody speaks the oi sound on like F below middle C. Obviously not, because we all have different ranges, especially the difference between men and women, right? But that you yourself have a scale. So we're going to read these words out loud all together now, and you're going to listen to how your voice starts low and moves high. Okay? So don't worry about like speaking the same pitch as anybody else. Just say it kind of naturally. Ready? Let's go. Boo, bone, book, bot, boy, bow, bar, bud, bird, bat, bet, bit, by, bay, bee. You feel it? Isn't that cool? Kind of, you feel your throat changing, like the way you do when you sing a low note or sing a high note, right? Now, this is not just a cool, like, random, arbitrary scholarly fact. It is a cool scholarly fact, but it's also connected to meaning. That these same writers thought that the vowels have psychological associations. That the lower the pitch of the vowel, the more of a doom and gloom type of mood is conveyed. Or on the other hand, a soothing, smooth kind of a mood. Okay? So those are two different emotions, obviously. But they're both on the low end of the vowel scale. And then the highest ones have to do with fear and screaming and screeching and clenching your teeth, or with hearing the all clear and being cheerful because things are near and things are real. So again, two contrasting emotions, but they seem to fit with those vowel sounds. So if you are aware of this when you're writing, you can actually use this to your advantage to convey emotions. Now, you might be doing this anyway without knowing it. Because I guarantee you that just like the way, Bach didn't know that there were these perfect mathematical relationships between all the notes he was writing, he just had a fantastic ear, right? Similarly, you might just get the feeling of when it's the right time to choose a certain word. Like when you want to convey a certain mood, you're going to use the word screech, rather than the word say or speak, because it's the right mood to convey the terror of the moment, even though you hadn't known this yet. Okay? And it's not only vowels these writers argue, that have psychological impact, but consonants as well. That the consonants that are most like vowels, the ones that you can kind of sustain, have the most cheerful association. So lovely, limpid, liquid, luscious, lucid, because L is very like a vowel. You can sustain it, right? So say for me right now, if you would please, the vowel O and make it last for 3 seconds. Ready? Go. O. Okay? Now say the consonant K and make it last for 3 seconds. Go. You're not holding the K, you're holding the after it, right? You can't hold K because it's a plosive. It just happens once and it's gone. So the ones that you can hold, now can you hold an M? You can. So it's most like a vowel. And so it seems to be associated with things being yummy and being murmurous and being mother-like and all those lovely womb-like things, right? There you get a combination of the low vowel ooh that's soothing and the soothing M sound. And then in contrast, the plosives tend to have explosive kinds of impacts. Prick, pop, point, poke, pierce, pound, punch, stick, stamp, stop, stonk, strike, steal. I just totally made up that list. I didn't read what was on the board, sorry. Tick, tock, tack, take, took, tonk, crush, crunch, crack, creak, creep. And if you think of some of your favorite classic poets, you can think of how they were using these effects, right? Does anybody come to mind right now, a poet you can think of that you know was actually really using these effects really well, whether or not he or she was conscious of it? Think of anybody?
Actually, kind of makes me think of Dr. Seuss.
Very nice. Not to be underestimated as a poet, right? Yes. Definitely meter, super, super strong in Dr. Seuss, right? Meters that really kind of get into your body. You can feel them. Can you quote us a line from Dr. Seuss?
No.
Okay, that's a lot of pressure. Anybody?
The cat in the hat said that.
The cat in the hat said that. Very nice. So you've got internal rhyme, you've got all the cheerful vowels, and you've got single syllable words in a nice strong meter. Very lovely. What's that?
I have them like going through my brain.
Very nice. You could have worse things stuck in your head. Okay, any other poets come to mind that you think are probably using these devices, whether they know it or not? Oh, come on. Poe.
I was going to say that.
Well, then why didn't you?
I didn't know this one.
Well, say it.
Oh.
Poe, good job. Can you think of any specific instances or talk about how he uses this a little bit?
For some reason, I thought of the one that we read in class.
Can you tell the class which one it was or just escape your memory at the moment?
No, if you remember it.
I don't remember it.
Oh, because I remember like that was the time that you started talking about this. For
Yep.
English 15, it was Annabelle Lee.
That's
had
right.
that nice gentle.
Yep.
Ease.
All these L's and E's in Annabelle Lee, so it's cheerful and limpid, even though it's about like her untimely death by freezing, right? And you were saying?
The Raven.
The Raven, yes. Which kinds of sounds are used in the Raven?
Tapping at my chamber door or something.
Right, so the tapping is actually what we would call onomatopoeia, which is where he's using a word that sounds like the thing it's naming. So the word tapping sounds like tapping, sort of. And then we read the philosophy of composition. So does anybody remember what he said he picked first of all? When he sat down to write that poem, he chose one thing first. Do you remember what it was? No? And then we talked about that as well. Jerry, do you remember? No? 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 It was the word nevermore. And it was because he wanted that O sound that's depressing and the R sound, because he thought they sounded gloomy. He says he picked the noises first and then he was like, now let me think of a word that has that noise in it. Now let me think of a story in which I can use that word over and over and over in a sensible way. That's what he says. I mean, whether or not he's telling the truth is another story, but it's interesting anyway. So just as an example, I don't know whether it's a good one or not, but it's just because, like Poe, we know best how we compose our own stuff. This is like totally random because it's out of context. This is from a play. And in the play, there's just this sort of typical love story of these two people meet and they hate each other first, and they're really great at each other's nerves and end up together, right? Like that typical story. But they meet on 9/11, and he's a cop and she's a nurse. So this scene is happening like immediately, under the cloud of dust in New York and so forth. So I'm not reading this for the purpose of the content, but because what I did in this is I went through the scale of vowels, like to show her change of mood. Okay? So even if the speech doesn't make any sense, you can listen for that. So she says, "Who would do this? What use is such cruelty? And what can I do? Swoon, moan, no, I am struck numb. No emotion assaults my bones. Smoke of noon is shocked with the colors of gruesome wounds, and I have looked in horror and heard the howls move through me. No one who stood counting pulses, worked to comfort blood, knelt by open wounds, or nursed the living beside tombs could cry aloud on such a day, only reach out and say, who poured out this lunacy, and other, and alien hate? I don't mean their color, I don't mean their race. Washington paints a face, sprays ethnic names in spittle on our screens. Saddam, Taliban, Islam, and jihad. That is not it. Yes, I am afraid, but not of difference of skin." And she goes on like that. So do you hear how like the vowels are moving up the scale as she talks? And she ends with, "I will go home and weep and weep and weep. Sisters, I will not sleep." So it ends with that high-pitched E at the end of it. So that's something that you can be aware of. Any other thoughts before I go on? Questions, comments? Okay. So then moving on to the third and final concept to talk about, which is form, right? Formal poetry. Now, I don't exclusively write formal poetry. I write free verse and all that kind of stuff, but I actually think of free verse as being just one form in the whole history of poetry. Like it's almost just one color in the palette or one thing that you can draw from. So I actually recommend that the best way to learn to write really good free verse is to practice the forms first, because they kind of train your ear and they kind of discipline your ear. Just like I think everybody who wants to perform any kind of music, whether it's popular music or rock music, should have a classical training first, so they can kind of learn like what has been done and what the vocabularies are, so that then when they're choosing what to do, they're really choosing freely. Like if you actually don't study the classics, you're actually not choosing freely, you're just a slave to your own time period and to the fads of the moment. So we'll talk about form and pattern in poetry, art, and nature. Isn't this an amazing picture? Do you see what it is?
How many floors is that? I count 6.
Yeah. But what else does it look like?
Conch shell.
Yeah, the inside of the conch shell or the nautilus shell, right? And does anybody know what the Fibonacci sequence? What is that?
Is it plus 1 spiral? It's a perfect spiral.
Yes. Does anybody know how it works?
It's the equation for a perfect spiral.
Yeah, it's the equation of perfect spiral. Does anyone know what the numbers are, actually?
Yeah, you start with 1, 1, and then you add, to
Yes.
get the next one, you add the last one you did to the previous one, so 1, 1, 2, 3, 5,
Right.
and then 8.
So you add 1 plus 1 to get 2, you add 2 plus 1 to get 3, you add 3 plus 2 to get 5, you add 5 plus 3 to get 8, you add 8 plus 5, and so forth. And then if you graph that out, it makes what you all just called the perfect spiral. What makes it perfect? Who says it's the perfect spiral? Like, aren't there lots of other spirals that could be made? But it occurs in nature. So, this guy Fibonacci comes along, he's a mathematician, he's playing with numbers, and he discovers this formula, but it's already been there ever since there was a nautilus shell or a sunflower with its spiral of seeds, right? Or all these other things, a pine cone with its spiral of, I just forgot the word for the little things around the pine cone. So that's kind of cool. There's proportion, even if it's not a Fibonacci sequence. There's other kinds of symmetry and proportion, and obviously her standing there pretending to chuck a rock to be the discus thrower is just an added bonus. And she immediately got in huge trouble after that, and they were going to arrest her and smash her camera, and she had to talk her way out of it really fast because you're not supposed to touch any of the ruins. She didn't know that. But ignoring that hilarious story in the middle, you can just see the symmetry, right? Like here's a repeated pattern of these up and down columns all the way around, and yet they're also in a proportion because you've got a long side of the building and a short side of the building, which leads me to the golden proportion. You heard about this one? Golden mean, the golden ratio. So it's a ratio of 8.5. Well, so what? But it's a ratio that also occurs all kinds of places in nature like, I actually haven't checked, but I would probably bet that this is a ratio, the long side of 8 to the short side of 5. But I also know that you see the ratio in my friend here, being goofy, because this ratio occurs here. Ratio of 8 to 5, ratio of 8 to 5, okay? Ratio of 8 to 5.
I don't get it.
If you were to measure these two bones, okay, and then express it as a fraction, the ratio would be 5 over 8. So however many centimeters or millimeters it actually is. And then the same ratio is repeated if you took this length and this length and made them into a fraction. And then if you took this length and this length. And then it divides up somewhere on the human body as well, and the proportions of the face. So this is such a beautiful proportion that it gets repeated in architecture a lot of times, usually, quite frequently. Windows are in that proportion quite frequently. Books and pages and pieces of technology are frequently in that proportion because it's somehow the eye likes it. Okay? So then I wonder if that has anything to do with why the sonnet is so very popular. The sonnet is not a ratio of 8 to 5, it's a ratio of 8 to 6. But it's pretty close. And if you divide up the sonnet into those two halves, the 8 half and the 6 half, maybe it's somehow kind of aesthetically satisfying. I don't know. I mean, why are we still writing sonnets, right, 700 years after they first became popular? Maybe that's one reason they're kind of satisfying. And then the Fibonacci sequence actually dances back and forth. It never exactly reaches the golden proportion, but it jumps around side to side, so you could graph it as a relationship as well. So that's getting kind of technical. You don't necessarily need to know that at all, but sometimes writers will use that if they're writing a novel or a play, they'll have the climax appear at the 8 to 5 point rather than the halfway point or the 3/4 point or something. They'll have it occur at that. I think it's 5.63 of the way through, or 56% of the way through. And I know a composer who frequently does that with her pieces, that the musical climax will occur at that point, rather than just halfway or 2/3 or 75%. So there's a thought. There's also, of course, the rule of threes, that photographers like to divide up their pictures so that things sort of break up into three. So you kind of have like a plane of field here, a plane with the person, and another plane of field over there as well. Okay, but what in the world does this have to do with poetry? Well, there are lots of poetic forms that involve patterns of various kinds that are kind of arbitrary, right? Like somebody just sort of made them up. But since form and pattern happen so much in nature, there's something about these types of repetition in poetry that remains perennially popular. So here are some of the different kinds. Some of the most repetitive forms: the rondo, the sestina, the pantoum, and the villanelle. Anybody heard of any of those kinds?
We're going to write a villanelle.
All right. Do you know what it is yet? Where did I put my dry erase marker? Here it is. Do you know what it is yet? The villanelle? Okay, so the villanelle, I'll put this right here, don't go poking. So the villanelle is a pattern where you write the first line, the second line, the third line. They have to rhyme with each other.
Oh, and then
like
you
that.
repeat those 3 lines.
Almost.
Well,
You make up a new fourth line, a new fifth line, and then you repeat line 1.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you make up a new 6th line, a new 7th line, and you repeat line 3. You continue doing that. You gather up the 4
How
together
long
at the
does
end.
it have to be?
There's actually, the strictest is 19 lines. You can add extra stanzas if you want to be a little freer. You look terrified.
I am terrified.
Why? Explain. Tell me what frightens you.
All of it. 19 lines and rhyming and using the same line and still making sense.
So you don't actually write 19 lines, because lines 1 and 3 come back so many times. You actually write 11 or 12 fresh lines, and they get repeated.
And only 2 rhymes.
And only 2 end sounds, only the A sound and the B sound. So choose a word that has lots of rhymes, right? Like don't choose orange for your end word. Right? There are a few words that rhyme with orange, loosely, right?
Door hinge.
Right, door hinge. Loosely, yes, loosely. So, okay, I challenge anyone in the room to write a villanelle in which your 2 end words are orange and purple. right? And then you have to come back to that over and over and over again. Our experience both suggests that when students have to write all different kinds of forms, they actually love the villanelle the most. It's one of these instances where it kind of writes itself, and it's very, very song-like. It's very lilting. It's very beautiful. So, sestina. Does anybody know what a sestina is? I think this is the hardest one to write. Whew. The sestina occurs when you choose 6 words, and they have to occur at the ends of the 6 lines, and then those end words have to repeat in a given pattern. So word 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. So you're always working your line towards that word, and the trick is not to let the word dictate your content. So don't just write some stupid nonsensical line with the words all out of order just to end with that, right? And also not to end stop with that word, but to flow over it onto the next line. A pantoum. Are you guys going to do a pantoum? No? It's quite similar to a villanelle, only it's 4-line stanzas, and you end up repeating all the 4 lines in a predetermined pattern. Okay? So it's just like music, in which you have predetermined patterns of verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, that kind of thing, or older musical forms in which you had to repeat certain patterns. I already talked about the villanelle out of order. Okay, so your vote right now. Would you like me to read to you a sestina, a pantoum, or a villanelle? I hear a vote for the villanelle. Villanelle. Okay. Villanelle. Called Honestly. What have you been doing with your eyes? Have you been washing them with acid rain? The pain behind your irises implies that touching needles, telling dirty lies, and breathing smoke is not a funny game. What have you been doing with your eyes instead of sleeping normally? Surprise! You've drunk yourself to death. When you're awake, the pain behind your irises implies the nightmare doesn't dissipate with sunrise. Do you think poison will not strip your veins? What have you been doing? With your eyes wide open, pouring sludge in your insides? Start gazing at your soul and see the stain the pain behind your irises implies. Though you paint happy colors, I surmise that blue and gray are your internal shades. The pain behind your irises implies what you have been doing with your eyes. See how the last 2 lines, they started out as 1 and 3, then they come against each other at the end. So you have to create them in the beginning so that they can have both of those meanings. Okay, that was fun.
I think it's also interesting, around the 3rd time one of those lines is used, it's actually broken, which is a 0. There's a period.
Yeah. What have you been doing? With your eyes wide open. Yes. Which originally the French troubadours who invented this form would not have done. They would have had it exactly the same every time it repeated. But one of the beauties of living when we do in history is that these forms are so much freer that we can use them as a basic sort of template and then go off. So like that sonnet I showed you at the beginning, I didn't rhyme every other line. I rhymed X, A, X, A, X meaning it didn't rhyme with anything. X, B, X, B, right? So I freed myself up, and I used very loose rhymes. I much prefer looser rhymes. In this one, they were more exact than I frequently use. And then in that sonnet, I had the last line be too long. I like the last line to kind of carry a bit more weight at the end there. So we can really, really free them up. And then when I do a sestina, I think this is the most fun thing about sestina. That's when we have the exact 6 words at the ends of the lines. I like to pick a word that can be used in many different parts of speech, or that can have lots of prefixes and suffixes, so that I don't end up just repeating the exact same word. Because then for me the game is how many different ways can I deploy this word, rather than can I simply just repeat it. I can. How are we for time and boredom?
We're good. We have another half hour.
Okay. Well, I've got 2 sestinas. One's really nice and pretty, it's about music, and the other one's really nasty and heartbreaking. Painful. Yeah, I shouldn't have said that because I knew you were going to do that. But the other one's actually more interesting as far as how I deploy the words. So, this is not a democracy, I'm going to read the pretty one. Sorry, Julian. If you want to read the other one, you can buy my book. Okay, so it's called Meditation, Chopin in the Snow. Let me put up the pretty little sestina picture. So, actually, that's an amazing picture, isn't it? That's just a fantastic picture. It looks to me like there's a train station in Paris. Anyway. Okay, so I'm going to ask you at the end what the 6 words were that I repeated. But that's not fair because ordinarily you wouldn't be listening for that. You would just be listening to the poem, for its own sake. So now it becomes more of an exercise. But this is a learning opportunity. So meditation, Chopin in the snow. Oh, this is the happy one. Just wait, right? Okay. I know what a heart feels like when it breaks. I once knelt in a tiny chapel in the dark, under arched stained glass, shaken with the kind of weeping that is as red as the inside of a broken body, gold as threads of life unraveled, shaped like shattered windows or unfinished songs, lovely and unendurable. This day is nothing like it, lovely with a gentle kind of comfort, but the beauty breaks my heart nevertheless. It doesn't take much. Trees arching over the path, heavy with sparkling winter, weeping willows dripping into their own shadows, disembodied cries of hidden kingfishers, the sounds and shapes of a late February run stretched out and shaped by a river. Curling its path to lead to loveliness unbearable, out into solitude so silent I fear to break the softness with my double tread. Larch and lilac, sleeping. The very whiteness makes me weep, as does the music of my pulse, the beauty of a body that is young, yet knows the intimations of the body's coming age. I would not lose my memory for my shape, would not exchange ideas for an imaginary love, yet wonder how the mind goes on in broken flesh, wonder if a wounded figure feels the archetype of what it could have been. I should not weep on such a day for thoughts, yet I am weeping to the music that I wear close to my body in my very ears, a study in the colors and shapes of poignancy. Each stricken note a single tone of beloved melancholy. I wish I could stop the breakneck pace of snowflakes, slow them so the Gothic architrave of each microcosm lifts its tiny architraves and crystal naves against the silent sun and sweeps the sky with leaded glass. I believe anybody could pray in a cathedral made of ice or a shapely sepulchre of frost. If that is so, more lovely still the vaults and domes of unbreakable splendor, while I will one day break my heart on every archway, cast my body's perfect shape in shadows of startling light, laugh in the heartache of love, and weep tears that hurt no more. So what were the 6 words? Lovely. Breaks. Arch. Sweep, weep. 2 more. No? What? Body. Very nice. What? Shape. There you go. Very nice. But so I totally cheated, right? Because breaks, break, broken, breakneck. That's a stretch, right? Unbreakable, and then break.
So you can use words with the word in it?
I did. I don't know.
We don't have to do this.
I mean, whoever the Sestina police are, right? But this it applies to Villanelle too, not because are you going to repeat the line exactly, or are you going to change the verb tense of the line to change the meaning? Are you going to break the line in the middle the way I did? Are you going to play with it like that? Now, this one was fun. Arched, arching, larch. I mean, that's doesn't even count, right? Archetype, architecture, and architraves and archway. That one was probably the most fun. Use that word. Then the others were a bit closer, except weep and sweep is a bit shifty. And that was about it. So there's a Sestina for you.
Did you enjam any of those?
I did. I tried to enjam as many of them as possible because I didn't want the end words to just be ching, ching, ching. So I actually enjammed the majority of them, if you like to look. And I could pull it up and screen it.
Yeah.
Do you want me to pull it up? Would it be worth talking about enjambment? I think I'm at the end of this. Yeah, just like the final inspirational statement there. So any thoughts then? I'm going to pull up that Sestina so you can see the enjambments, but do you have any questions while I do that? Was that a stretch or a hand?
Stretch.
Okay. All right, while I'm doing this, would anybody email me a poem of yours? And we can bring it up on the screen and talk about it? Yeah? No, anything. Anything at all. Okay, so Professor Childs and I were just talking about enjambment. Does anybody know what that is?
Break it into, like, if you don't write the line out all the way, you break it so that when you read it, it's read.
The next one.
Yeah.
Maybe. I'm not sure.
It's kind of like
Okay.
broken up in
Right.
So
Yeah,
this
like,
is
I
not
know-
enjambed. This is end stopped.
Yeah, like.
Okay? But this is enjambed, arch stained glass.
Yeah.
When it forces you, if you're reading correctly, when it forces you to read from one line on to the next. That's enjambment. Very nice. So yeah, when you're writing a sestina, it's really nice to enjam so that those 6 words don't just hit your ear over and over and over again. I think that the better villanelles are enjambed. Because if you just have, like, if your whole villanelle is just 19 single lines that actually are not connected, I don't think that's as interesting as skillful. Try to make them flow together.
How long does it take you to write something?
10 years. I mean,
You're not gonna get a whole.
I usually,
Oh, no, I'm not.
now,
Come on.
I usually draft a poem pretty fast. Like anywhere from 20 minutes to 3 hours for drafting a poem. But then, like, I live with it over and over and over and over and over and over again. Sometimes they kind of stay the way they were drafted. And then sometimes they become so wildly different. So I had another sestina that I brought to a workshop and then exchanged poems with somebody from the workshop. And he ended up making this suggestion, like, I think this stanza down here needs to move up there. And I wrote back and was like, it's a sestina! If I move that stanza, I have to rewrite absolutely everything because of the word pattern. Honestly, I don't think that he knew what a sestina was. I don't think he knew what he was doing to me. But I did it. And that was one of the most challenging revisions ever because it meant changing the chaining word pattern. Yeah. But sometimes those drafts, I mean, I'm a little bit different because I tend to write the poem kind of in my head beforehand. I kind of do the drafting mentally, like composing lines and working with them and then getting them down. But you can also just work with it on the paper. So is anybody emailing me anything that we can then just notice your vowels? We can talk about the emotional connotations of your different vowels and stuff like that. It's not to criticize, it's just to use as an
Come on.
illustration.
How long is it supposed to
Doesn't matter.
be? Yeah, sent you one that's a little too long.
Did you send me one? All right. Thank you. Okay, I'm giving you all time to send me stuff while I log into my email here.
Okay, so it's like just in the email, it's not like.
Yep. Stop that. Oh. I am. Is everybody in the room? Over 18? Is this the right link?
Yeah, I don't remember why I put it like that. It's not bad at all.
All right. Would you like to come up and read it out loud to us?
No, that's fine. You said you were going to read it to us.
Okay, I will. I just wanted to give you the chance. Okay. Here we.
Wait, time out. Is this a specific kind?
Let's read it first and then ask that question. Okay? Good question. See, the only problem with me reading it is that I'll be imposing my guess as to punctuation and inflection.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
No, well, that's the interesting part, though. I want to see like how you would read
What
it.
I've
Okay.
been trying to tell them is they each have their own voice.
Yep. But really skillful poet writes it down in such a way that it then manipulates the reader to read it how the poet wanted it read. And that's really, really, really hard because we don't have ways of writing things like, say this louder, except maybe all caps, and say this word more slowly, unless you like stretch out the font or something funny like that, right? We don't have ways of saying, use a silly falsetto here or anything like that. So it's kind of up to the reader. And then especially because this one takes the, the freedom of where we are in poetic history to not use much punctuation, it gives the reader even more of a challenge. So I'll just give it a try. We'll see what happens. Alive. Alive, I am alive. Yes, I am alive. My bones tingle with the energy of life itself. The energy of life surrounds me, it protects me, it cradles me, guides me. Guidance. Guidance that watches as I become one with that vast road, after 6, before 9. I look in my glass-made field of vision and I am alert, alert like the dog and his mailman. I am alert, alert like the soldier and his enemy. I am alert. My mind focused and my intentions clear, I make onward press to my education most near and dear. Behold, this day of higher teachings and higher truths does not belong to me. For I am destined to become the victim of circumstance's wet road, circumstance's winter wet road, as I make contact with the 80,000-pound, 18-wheeled personification of doom and despair, death and tragedy, bold and might. And from this contact, my steel against his heavy steel, I spin, twirling like the pinwheel in a little girl's hand on a summer day. Here I am with clear motives heading towards that higher learning, and now I sit here spinning on this vast wet road. Time slows. My heart calms. Moments of clarity. As I attempt to make my steel my own, once more I become one with another personification of doom. That's what I called double doom. And yet my mental is vital as I direct my wheel of control towards the dirt of Mother Earth. Time resumes. I climb out victorious, unscathed. There I stood 6 feet 2 inches tall in front of twisted metals, skin still black like the kettle whistling on a cold winter day. Dazed and confused, I could not help but look upon the heavens and say, thank you. Thank you for this chance you have given me. Thank you for this guidance you have blessed me with. Thank you for this protection you have granted me. Thank you. For here I stand upon this cold dirt, watching the cars pass fast before me. I am alive. I think that deserves applause. Thank you. You want to say anything about it?
It was after my accident. It's great.
So it's both literal and metaphorical. Yeah, because it's absolutely a really powerful metaphor. But that's how the best metaphors work, right? Like, just think about what a metaphor is. You take two things. Usually one is abstract, and then one is like a concrete physical object. And the best metaphors are when your concrete physical one is actually a real concrete physical thing. So that's really powerful. So what two things is he comparing here? What's the metaphor? The literal physical is the accident. And then what's the other thing that it's being compared to? What?
Life.
Is it anything more specific than life? Okay, yeah, good. What else? Wonder if this will let me highlight. Nope. It won't let me highlight. Oh, wait, it will if I do this. Hang on. Right, there's a great highlight. Okay, well, that bit right there. What is it? Yeah, education and obstacles to education, which is fantastic because education is something that's hard to wrap your head around because it's a big abstract noun, right? Things like freedom, liberty, justice, education. Right?
Like I was on my way to school, so I just called school education.
Oh, wow.
I was
Yeah.
on my way to school, so I just called it.
So it's even more literal. Yeah. So are you also meaning, now it doesn't matter because once you put your poem out there, we get to do whatever we want to it as far as interpretation. Yikes. But were you also thinking that like the obstacles to your education are kind of like this 80,000-pound thing in your way? Yeah. And not only being in your way, but hitting you. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what about the things that I've been talking about today, about patterns, about sounds, about music? What do y'all notice in here? Repetition. Pointed out to us?
Guides me, guidance, and then like alert, alive.
So patterns of 3, right? There's something about the human mind, or let's say at least the quote-unquote Western mind. For some reason we like patterns of 3, right? Think about fairy tales and how many times 3 things have to happen in fairy tales. So you get this nice repetition of 3. You were going to observe?
During the crash, she uses more consonants.
Consonants, yes.
For the harsher sound. And then, like, there's always that moment in the car crash where everything kind of happens in slow motion and then it all tumbles into a mass that you can't understand. And there he like uses like the time slows and then it calms. Like he starts using more S's and like slower sounds.
Yeah.
And then he goes into like harsher vowels, not harsh vowels, but like deeper vowels.
Yep.
It's pretty cool. I don't know. That's what I just like.
Take a look at these 4 lines, okay? Think specifically about the vowels for a moment, right? Like, look what we do. Look what you did. Steal, doom. The highest vowel possible on the emotional scale and the lowest vowel possible on the emotional scale, juxtaposed in 2 lines. Did you know that thing about the vowel scale before you wrote this?
No, it was just right.
Exactly. That's exactly what I just said. If you've got a good ear, you do these things without even knowing it. What were you trying to express there? The range of emotions. Did you get it into the words themselves? Yeah. The lowest possible word and the highest possible word. So the worst kinds of fear of doom and then the screechy sort of terror of steal. And then not only that, but look at this, double doom. I would say this is a double use of musical properties. We get 2 low vowels, and oo, and then we get alliteration, dd. So not only is it a double doom, it's a double D, and it's a double use of low vowels. So you have the gift of being able to intuit what sounds you need to express your meaning. Very cool, right? Before we even studied it. Let me go back to what you were saying about how time happens in an accident, right? Look at line length. This is something I didn't talk about very much, right? Somebody makes some observation. Now, did I change the zoom so that the lines are not quite right? Are they?
No, good.
Summer day is its own line? No, I didn't think so. There we go. That's more like it. So there are the proper line breaks. So look at from I spin to clarity. And somebody talk about line length for a minute in that section.
Well, when the accident's happening, then it's more chaotic. They're like really long lines.
Yes.
And then as time slows and things become clearer, the lines are shorter and more direct.
Right. So this is an example of the poet manipulating the reader. And I mean that in the best sense possible, right? Forcing me to read it in certain ways. Like this is kind of breathless, right? Here I am with clear motives heading towards that higher learning, and now I sit here spinning on this vast wet road. If I'm going to be a proper reader, I won't take a breath in those 2 really long lines, and maybe not even in these 3 really long lines. So I'm going to be pretty breathless by the end of that. And that's the point, because that's how you feel. And then suddenly I get this break as a reader to just say 2 short words slowly. Time slows. And it lets me feel that. And this continues happening, right? Long lines contrasting with short lines in ways that are intentional. Very nice. Any other observations? Saying theoretically for a moment, just for the sake of discussion, let's say you wanted to rewrite this and revise it. Anybody have any suggestions? Any observations of things that maybe could be considered for changes? Well, that's good. Yeah.
Just to put punctuation into it, like to,
Okay.
like to go back and annotate it and decide where you want people to pause, and instead of just using line breaks, every time you want somebody to just stop and continue on another thought, to use punctuation. Because sometimes it's more effective to, if you have 2 things that are like really important, to put like a, what is it called, a poem in between the 2 of them, so that the reader, it's like a shorter pause than a line break.
It would be a really funny exercise to print out this poem and have everyone punctuate it and see how differently they punctuated it. Maybe you could do that. You could print out, 10 copies and give them to 10 friends and be like, where would you put the punctuation? What would it be? Just out of curiosity. I'm actually torn on the punctuation issue. I didn't have a hard time reading any of it. I don't know if I read it the way you intended. I'm kind of torn. I think that student poets or learning poets should use punctuation at first just to make sure that they master it. But this one kind of worked pretty well for me.
Well,
Down.
pull it up. It's funny Sørina mentioned that because I actually was struck by the 3 punctuation marks in there.
Yeah,
And
just
I kind of
one.
wondered why even bother, because you have these long lines, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
Maybe there's 4.
There's one there.
There's one there.
There's one
There's
there.
a comma up above.
There's one here.
In the
There's
third
one
line,
here.
4 or 5.
Yeah.
But there's not many. There's maybe 6. The energy of life surrounds me, it protects me, it cradles me. Comma. You don't need it because
Yeah.
you're already eliminating the commas in life surrounds me, it protects me, it cradles me. If you're going to do a series like that, you need commas. And you're using end stops, you're using the end of your line as a form of punctuation.
So I guess you're saying either take them all out or put them all back in standard. Yeah, one or the other.
Did you put a comma there because you were it's kind of almost like an epiphany, like all of this stuff is happening and then guides me is the most important part of that sentence, which is why you repeat the guidance. Like the energy of life surrounds me, protects me, cradles me, guides me, guidance that watches. Was that the point
that's how I
without
was thinking
realizing
it.
it?
That's cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Unfortunately, the comma doesn't do that. What does that is the double dash. The M dash, like when you press hyphen twice and then Word turns it into a long dash, that's the, ooh, epiphany coming after this piece of punctuation mark. So you might want to consider changing that comma into a double dash, but I'm still not sure because of what Professor Childs was just saying, like all or nothing. Like you could, you know what you could do? You could put a line break before guides and then you can tab it over. Like you don't have to have everything on the left margin. You can tab things as a way of showing meaning.
I think it also depends on who you want your audience to be. Like if you want your audience to be poets and people who read poetry often, that will know that a double dash means there's an epiphany coming, and will know what your punctuation is like meaning. Or if you just want somebody to
Oh, everybody knows that subconsciously.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
like dashes, they show interruption of thought. They show change of, even if you couldn't say that sort of an academic way. We could go on, but did anybody else send me one? Because if somebody else sent me one.
I did, but I changed my mind.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, come on, no changing your mind.
No?
All in or all
I
out?
changed my mind.
All right,
I changed my mind.
let's do it. Are these are separate ones?
Yeah.
All right, pick one. Which one are we going to talk about?
The one that wrote for the Earth Day project.
Okay, so this one. Can I just copy it over into a document so we can see it on its own? All right, would you like to read it? Would you like me to read it? Would you like to pick someone else to read it?
I can read it.
Okay.
Run. Run from the earth's winged health and stars and stripes that slash our hearts. From theorizers and memorizers, for people who hunt and kill. Run. Run for freedom, for color. Run. Run because you must.
Right. Okay. I'm going to do something to your poem. Yes, you should be able to write on it. Okay. Here's what I want us to do. Let's look at the meter. Do you know how to mark meter? Have you done that yet?
I haven't done any sketch.
Oh, this is a very small piece of board here. Okay.
Careful when you pull on those.
They go together, but then I'll have a nice big line right down the middle of the...
Shannon's laugh. What happens if you pull on them too hard?
They come off.
They come off.
Okay, so when we're marking poetry, we use a smiley face with no eyes to mean a weak or unaccented syllable, and we use a slash to indicate a strong or accented syllable. So, shall I compare thee to a summer's day, right? Or the Sir Patrick Spens, first line, the king sits in Dunfermline town, and so forth. Okay? So let's scan this poem. Let's do it. Let's mark it. Okay? You do it yourselves a little bit, and then I'll give you a minute, and then I'll mark it here. annoying, isn't it?
Thank you.
Well, I don't know what to do with it, except,
Put it back in the other side.
Oh.
Oh, that's okay, you got it.
there we go. Okay, I'm gonna go around the room. Person to the right of Jillian, sorry I don't know your name. How would you mark the first line? Which syllables are strong, which ones are weak? I think definitely. Any more you want to tell me in that line? Yep. Yep. I'm hearing Earth says strong. What do we think? It's hard to have 3 weeks in a row, actually. The voice kind of wants a strong one. And just, by the way, you need the possessive there. It's not plural Earths, it's possessive Earths. Earths. And then what about the last 3 syllables? Wounded health. I could be persuaded that it's strong, weak, strong, or weak, weak, strong. You said that line again, would you please? The whole line. Just read the whole line naturally.
Run from the earth's wounded health.
Okay, definitely weak, weak, strong then. Okay? Does that make sense, people? Jillian, what is the next line? Do you want to phone a friend?
Well, would the first 2 are weak, and then would stars be strong,
I think so.
and then stripes be strong, and would be slash strong too?
Yep, I think this is a very nice regular iambic line, except for the first as an extra syllable added on. Question, comment? No? Okay, person to the left of Jillian, so I don't know your name. Could you do the next line? That's a hard one. Which syllables sound like where you would clap or tap? Strong ones. And I want to make it bigger, but then I'll lose my... Yeah. Okay, anybody? No? I think it's and the theorizers and the memorizers, which breaks my rule about not wanting to have 3 weeks in a row, right? I think it's and the theorizers and the memorizers. It's kind of like a line that just has 2 strong beats and a lot of weak things just sort of packed in around it. Okay? All right. You, sir. Yep. People is 2 syllables. Yep. Yep. Nice. I think so. I think that's very exact. Okay, next person.
Strong.
Yep.
Weak.
Great. Yay. Yeah, nice. Last lines for you. You want to say that word out loud? And where did your voice sort of hit it more? Cuz, right? Cuz is strong. Because. So, because. And then how should I finish it? Anybody? Must. Okay, so that was a good exercise, just in seeing how your ear is for a poetic meter. And I'm guessing that have like 2 minutes left, am I right?
Yep.
Okay. So nice use of sort of natural meters. My tendency would be to say to a student writer, try using a metrical pattern. Rather than each line having its own meter, would be to pick a pattern. Now, it doesn't have to be the same for every line. You could choose a complex, like I'm going to have 3 lines of this meter and then repeat that again, or something like that. But just to show that you are the boss of the meter. The meter isn't the boss of you, right? That you are doing what you want to do. But also, does everyone notice how meter conveys meaning? Like the words that have the strong beats are actually the words that have the strong meaning. right? Like, and is not as important a word as hunt or kill in the context of the poem. So all this stuff has meaning. So I hope that's useful, and I'd love to see some more poems sometime. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
It's going to be interesting. Some of the lights are going to be all accents.
Yep.
It's like Morse code.
Yep.